Story from They Have Lip Cook. Fine, I'll throw away all the pillows. Format, on phone, all that good stuff. Setting. This happened about 8 years ago when I worked for one of the biggest hotels in the US. I'm talking about 3,200 rooms, and that place is the size of a small city. My position was Supervisor of Special Operations, which means I was the guy they came to when they needed to, say, change 1,000 bed frames for more modern ones, or change 5,000 light bulbs for ones more energy efficient, because we are going green and stuff like that. Now, a hotel this big is divided into 4 buildings, each with their own managers, supervisors, housekeeping and the like. Essentially, it was run like 4 separate hotels. The problem was that each building's managers had an exorbitant amount of power, and they ended up stepping on each other's toes day in and day out. Because of my position, I didn't work directly for any of them but for the Director of Housekeeping, or DH, because what I did had mostly to do with rooms. So whenever one of them tried to get me to take special care of them and their buildings, I could easily refuse. But most of the time, I did whatever they needed to get done if I had time, and because they were mostly nice people and good managers. Enter Douche Canoe, or DC, was the worst manager I have ever encountered in my career. He would go into the checkout rooms and steal tips from the housekeepers, take things left behind by guests instead of reporting them to lost and found, and talk to people like they owed him something, like his word was law. The story. One day, we get a VIP guest, one of the owners of the company that owned the hotel, so DH sends me to check the room he's to check in to the next day. So I did. I checked all the furniture, bed frame, mattress, lamps, light bulbs, AC unit, everything I could think of. And when I'm done, I give the good to go. Fast forward a week, the day after VIP checked out, I get called into DH's office, and the conversation goes something like this. DH, so VIP had a complaint about his room? Me, did I miss something? DH, not really. It was housekeeping who did. He noticed that one of his pillows was stained. The pillows are in a protective cover inside a pillowcase, so he had to have taken it out of both to notice it was stained, and requested another one, which was also stained. Me, and you want me to do something about it? DH, I want you to check all the pillows during renovations and take all the stained ones out of the rooms and send them to laundry and then place them back in the rooms. Me, that does going to take a couple of days and some overtime, but okay. The hotel was scheduled for renovations about 3 weeks from the date of the VIP pillow incident, where the hotel was supposed to shut down for 2 weeks and outside contractors would come in and do most of the work. During this time, I was supposed to just stand by and help out the contractors with whatever they needed. But because of the pillow incident, I now had something to do. So I had my instructions from DH and they date rolls by, and me and my team get to work. About halfway through the first building, I get a call on the radio from DC asking where I was. DH had had a family emergency and was out of town, leaving DC in charge of overseeing operations until he got back. I respond with my location and get back to work. About 10 minutes later, DC enters the room I'm currently working in, and the conversation goes like this. DC, you are going to throw away all the stained pillows. Me, now why would I do that when I have clear instructions from DH? DC, DH isn't here, and I'm telling you to throw away all the stained pillows. As soon as he finished the sentence, he turned around and started walking away when I said, but, and then he loses it and goes, you are nothing more than a glorified janitor. You will do as you're told. Throw away all the stained pillows and leave the thinking to the people with college degrees. To which I said nothing but, okay. After he left, I call my team on a different radio frequency and let them know the new plan and get a lot of seriously and what the f***. So I tell them that what the boss man wants, and that's exactly what the boss man will get. Anyways, we get back to work, pulling stained pillows from rooms. Remember, 3,200 of them. So it takes us about 3 days. During this time, we didn't just dump the pillows as we went. We stashed them in a storage room by the dumpster. Turns out most of the pillows were stained, so we're talking about 15,000. So after we are done, I emailed DC and say, all the stained pillows have been pulled and are on standby. Again, should I just take them to laundry like DH originally told me to do? Or should I proceed to dump them? To which he replied, yeah, whatever, just throw them away already like I told you to. So my team and I proceed to ask around the staff and gave a bunch of the away before filling 4 dumpsters with nothing but pillows. So days go by, and I'm just helping out the contractors when I get an email from DC saying, why aren't there pillows in the rooms yet? It was your responsibility. To which I replied, we don't have enough pillows for all the rooms, even with the stash. The stash was a storage room we kept full of new pillows, for whenever they broke, were bled on, or had too many people requesting extra pillows at the same time, but it was only like 500 give or take. We don't even have enough for even one building. He replied, what do you mean we don't have enough? How many pillows did you throw away? My response, you told me to throw away all the stained ones, so I did. About 15,000. To which he replied, 15,000? How could you be such an imbecile? Now what are we supposed to do? We can't delay the reopening. My response, I glorified janitor and can only follow orders. I'll leave the thinking to the people with college degrees. He proceeds to call DH on his personal phone, who was out of town attending his father's funeral, and belittle me. Say how incompetent I am and how I threw away all the pillows I was supposed to have washed and put back in the rooms. So I get a text from DH that just said, DC told me what you did. We'll talk when I get back in 2 days. During those 2 days, I compiled a folder with the email thread with the pillow conversation, and since I don't have access to the security mainframe, went to my buddy who is the security manager and checked the cameras, and I found the footage of him telling me that I'm a glorified janitor and to leave the thinking to the college graduates. There are no cameras in the rooms, but the hallway camera caught the audio. The 2 days went by, and as soon as I came in the next morning and pick up my radio, I get a call from DH to meet him in his office, so I head there with my folder and my footage in hand. When I walked in, he was sitting in his desk with DC standing next to him, and the conversation went like this. DH, take a seat. So I take a seat. DH, would you care to explain this situation you have put us in? Me, no problem. I pulled out my folder, opened it, put it on his desk, and push it towards him. He spends a couple of minutes reading it, including the transcription from the security footage, and when I can tell he's done reading, I said, they wouldn't let me take a copy of the security footage as per policy, but you can talk to insert security manager's name here, and he can show it to you. He then looks at DC with raised eyebrows, looks back at me and says, would you excuse us for a moment? I just nod, get up, and walk out. About 30 minutes later comes out DC with the biggest puppy who peed on the carpet and got hit with a rolled-up newspaper face I've ever seen. DH signals me to come in again and says, Mr. DC has decided to take some personal time indefinitely. Carry on with your day. And that's the story of how a manager tried to get me fired because of his stupidity, and it didn't work. TL, DR asshole manager, tries to get me fired because of something he told me to do, get fired instead. This malicious compliance was flawless. OP followed manager's arrogant instructions, which finally led to downfall of the manager. The email and security footage sealed manager's fate. The execution was perfect, and the manager got what he deserved. Story from Seth Borf. Sorry, this is a bit long, but I really needed to tell this story. I work as a mechanic at a manufacturing plant in nowhere, America, and I have been for over a decade now. Before I got assigned to my current location, the only way to get coffee here was to either bring some from home or pay $1 at a vending machine to get the crappy cheap stuff. I decided to go with the first option, but took it even further by bringing my spare coffee maker from home and then bringing in the usual supplies periodically. I kept it in the mechanic's office in plain view. For the longest time, it was very apparent that I was the only one using my coffee maker, even though I never said it was exclusively for me. This went on for about a year until I got a partner on my shift who also drank coffee. We came up with the idea of starting a coffee fund by leaving a jar for spare change next to the coffee maker. Whenever we ran out of something like sugar or whatever, one of the two of us would use the accumulated change in the jar to help replenish our supplies. This was all well and good, until my partner got promoted to maintenance supervisor some years later, making him my new boss, and I was by myself again. I left the jar sitting next to the coffee maker as usual and kept using the old routine. I also put a note on the side of the maker, in plain view, that said, "If you use the coffee maker, please put some spare change in the coffee fund jar so we can keep the supplies in stock." This was just in case someone from a different shift decided to use it when I wasn't there. However, one day I noticed that I was running out of sugar way too fast. I don't put much sugar in my coffee to begin with, so this told me that someone else was using the coffee maker. Eventually, I noticed that all the supplies were getting too low too fast, and not just the sugar. This normally wouldn't be a big deal, except I also noticed that the jar wouldn't accumulate like it used to. It either had the change I put into it, or someone would be taking change out, but not restocking our coffee supplies. I put up with this for a little while, but I eventually got fed up with being the only one buying supplies for the coffee, while one or more others were using it and taking money out of the jar. I took the coffee maker home and just started filling up my thermos with coffee and bringing it to work with me. About a week later, I get stopped in the aisle by a supervisor, not mine, as I'm trying to leave for the day. The following exchange occurs. Me is me. Saul, not his real name, is supervisor. Saul: "Hey, Sethborf, what happened to the coffee maker? Did it break?" Me: I was wondering who else was using it." "Nah, it didn't break. I just got tired of people taking money out of the coffee fund jar without using said money to buy more supplies. I was still buying them out of pocket." Saul: "You took it home?" Me: "Yeah. I've just been using my thermos to bring coffee." He cut me off. Saul: "You can't just take company property like that. You weren't the only person using it. We all used it." Me: "But it's my..." He cut me off again. Saul: "You either bring that back, or I'm reporting this to my boss, and we'll see what he's going to do about it." Me: "I'll bring it in if people will actually contribute to the fund instead of me having to buy everything out of pocket." Saul: "You'll do your job." Me: "My job is to fix these machines, not be the company barista." Saul: "It better be in there tomorrow, or I'm going to my boss about it." He walks off before I could say anything else. The next day comes, and I, of course, didn't bring my coffee maker back to the plant. At the end of my shift, Saul confronts me again. Saul: "Sethborf, did you bring the coffee maker back?" Me: "Nah, I told you, I'm not going to be the only one supplying it." Saul: "You can't just keep company property at home. That coffee maker has been in there for years, and you need to bring it back." Me: "I know it's been in there for years. It's been in there for as long as I've been here because I brought it from home. That's my coffee maker." Saul: "I'm calling my boss right now and we'll see what happens to you." Me, laughing: "Go ahead. I don't care. You can't tell me what to do with my personal property." I then walk out to my car and leave. While on the way home, my boss calls me. If you recall from earlier in this story, he used to be my partner. Even after his promotion, we remained close friends. The following conversation happens. Bob, not his real name, is my boss, former partner, close friend. Me, picking up the phone. "Hey Bob, what's up?" Bob: "I just got off the phone with Saul. What's all this about you taking company property home? That's not like you, man. What's he even talking about?" Me: "He didn't tell you what it was?" Bob: "Nope. He just said you admitted to stealing company property and refused to return it." Me: "Did you even ask what the supposed company property is?" Bob: "I did, but he wouldn't calm down enough to tell me. Looked like you really pissed him off." Me: "Yeah, I know. Hey, you remember that coffee maker I had in the office way back when?" Bob: "Haha, yeah, the coffee funds, right? Did anyone else besides us start using that thing?" Man, did I ever tell you that I still haven't had a cup of coffee as good as how you made it back then? Why are you bringing this up anyway? Wait, don't tell me that the company property Saul is referring to is me. Yeah, he's talking about my coffee maker. Bob. Look, Seth Borf, I know that's your personal property, but I really don't want Saul raising a stink about this to management. Nothing will come of it if he does, but it will just be a big waste of time for them to investigate and eventually write up some stupid company-wide email about property theft and blah, blah, blah. Just bring it back. Me. I'm not going to be the only one supplying the coffee. Bob. How about this? Bring it back in, but keep a spare set of coffee supplies in your personal locker. Bring in some supplies for everyone to use at first, even use the coffee fund jar again. But after that initial stock, just only resupply for yourself. That way, if Saul or anyone else wants to use it, they are going to have to bring in their own supplies when that initial stock runs dry. Is that okay with you? Me. I think I'll do that. And that's what I did. The next day, I did as Bob asked, but I also kept additional supplies for myself in my personal locker. I didn't tell anyone else about this except for Bob. Saul confronted me yet again that same day. Saul, I see you brought the coffee maker back. Me? Yeah, Bob asked me to. Saul, you're lucky he didn't report you to Human Resources for it. Me? Report me to Human Resources. For a coffee maker. Yeah, okay. Saul, whatever. Now we can all have our coffee again, no thanks to you. Me? No thanks to me, yet it's my coffee maker. Saul, don't get that tone with me. I'll call Bob and he'll straighten you out again. As planned, I let the initial coffee supply stock run dry without ever replenishing it. I also didn't contribute anything to the coffee fund jar. This took about a week, and there was never any change in the jar. Saul confronts me yet again. Saul, hey Seth Borf, we are completely out of creamer and sugar, and the coffee tin itself is running low. Me, yeah, okay. Saul, don't you think you should get on that? Me, I'm not the company barista, Saul. Saul, okay, but we don't have any creamer or sugar. Me, then buy some. Saul, I thought you did that? Me, oh me? No. I had surgery that prevents me from shitting out creamer. Bring your own. Saul, Seth Borf, you need to do your job. Me, I do my job. What do you do? Saul, Seth. Me, no. Saul, what do you do? Don't say your job, because your job isn't to pester someone to buy coffee supplies out of their own pocket, is it? Saul, that's not very nice. Me, you're right. It's not very nice at all. It's also not nice to complain to Bob because I won't bring my own personal property to work, now is it? Saul, but we need coffee. Me, then bring your own. This isn't my job. If you want creamer, then you need to bring it in yourself. I'm not supplying the coffee anymore. Saul, Seth Borf, I'll call Bob again. Me, call him then. He'll tell you the same thing I just told you, and you'll have wasted your time. Just like how you're wasting my time now. I'm going home. Have a good one. I start walking out. Saul, wait, come back. When I go in for my next shift, all the supplies are fully stocked, and they remain that way for good. Someone else has taken the responsibility of resupplying the coffee. I even noticed change in the jar regularly building up. I haven't contributed a single penny, but it's still filling up. Someone else has taken over handling the coffee supplies. I haven't asked who, but I think either Saul is doing it himself or he's got someone else doing it. It's free coffee for me, so I don't care either way. Update. Thanks for the silver. Update. Thanks for the gold. Update. Thanks for the Bless Up. Update. Thanks for the Bless Up Pro. Update. Thanks for the ring. Update. Eliminated all acronyms as to abide by this sub's rules. Long overdue update. I had to finally retire the coffee maker about a week ago because somebody decided to steal my coffee pot from it. Pissed me off so much that I just took the thing home. Saul is no longer at my plant, so nobody seemed to care anyway. The malicious compliance was perfect and executed flawlessly. It was also funny how people fight over small things like coffee. BTW, OP complied and got free coffee for most of his time at the office. Whatever, the compliance was perfect, which ensured OP would get free coffee. Story from gingerbreadman_13. Homeowners Association doesn't care about my health, but how dare my flat look non-conformist. This happened 5 years ago. It's a long one, but worth the read, or at least I think so. First, a bit about me. For the story's sake, you can call me Alex. I was a 29-year-old male at the time. I'm generally very friendly and accommodating and try to avoid confrontation where possible and always try to do things in a peaceful and patient manner. Now, on to the backstory. I lived in a gated community comprised entirely of multiple blocks of small apartments. Every block of apartments looked exactly the same as the other blocks of apartments around it. They were a few floors high, and I lived on the first floor. Clarification, I believe in America the first floor is the ground floor. Where I live, the ground floor is the ground floor, and the first floor is the one above the ground floor, or, as Americans would call it, the second floor. So I lived one floor above the ground floor. The Homeowners Association, Chuck Estate Management, was extremely strict about any infringements regarding things we weren't allowed to do and would issue fines very quickly if you were in breach of the rules and didn't rectify it. For example, you were allowed to have furniture on your patio, but you weren't allowed to have any decor on your patio. I imagine it was because they wanted uniformity in the appearance of the blocks of flats. Also, no loud noise or music was allowed after 10 p.m. I personally agreed with the no loud noise thing. It was quite a peaceful community that frankly was very well managed, which is something I enjoyed about it. I didn't agree so much with the no decor thing. As a photographer and artist, personal expression is important to me, but I figured as long as I kept it tasteful and stylish and mostly out of visible sight, they hopefully wouldn't have an issue with it. I'm a big fan of vintage motorbikes and had a few tasteful, or at least I thought they were tasteful, metal posters with classic bikes like Triumph Bonnevilles, Indian Scouts, BSAs, Nortons, Ducatis, etc. up on one of the walls of my patio. They were at such an angle that meant they weren't easily visible from the rest of the complex, so didn't think it would be an issue. Somehow, it was still spotted by the estate manager. But more on this later. I also had a few pot plants on the ledge of my balcony. Clarification, plants in pots, not marijuana. Again, we'll get to that later. You need to know about it for the rest of the story. My downstairs neighbour also used to smoke in her back garden. The ground floors had small gardens, and my balcony was directly above her garden. Her smoke would rise up and go through my open bedroom window, or the large sliding door on my patio, which was usually open in summer, and enter my flat. Since I don't smoke, this bothered me. The smell seeped into my furniture and bedding. Even my sleeping pillows smelled of smoke. I politely spoke to her in person about it and she apologized for the inconvenience, but never stopped doing it. She was actually a very friendly lady. She was never horrible. I suppose she was nice enough to be friendly, but not nice enough to stop doing it. So I decided to take it a step further, and I emailed the manager of the gated community to ask if there was something that could be done. The following is the email transaction between me and the manager, who I'll call Nicole. Good day. I stay in Unit 117 on the first floor, and my downstairs neighbour who lives on the ground floor, although being a very friendly old lady, has a nasty habit of smoking in her patio. My issue is that in summer with the heat, I leave my bedroom window and sliding door open to keep my flat cool, and the fumes from her cigarettes are constantly rising up and entering my apartment. I'm not a smoker, so this bothers me. My flat smells as if a smoker lives there. Now my question is there any rule or law that says she can't smoke in her patio due to her smoke entering my flat? She knows her smoke bothers me and has apologized to me for it, but hasn't done anything about it. If she were to only smoke inside her flat or outside her front door, I'm sure the smoke wouldn't come into my flat nearly as much since I never have my front door open. Thanks in advance. Regards, Alex. She responded with, "Good morning, Alex. This is a very contentious issue, as this is her home and there is no law at the moment stating you cannot smoke in your home. Regards, Nicole. I wasn't happy with that response, but I figured there was nothing more I could do about it and didn't want to bother making a bigger issue of it, so I just forgot about it and moved on until about a year later when estate management picked up on 2 infringements by me. At this point, Nicole had resigned and Stuart had replaced her. This is the email I got from Stuart. Good day. I trust that you are well. Please could you remove the pots from the wall as per the attached photo, as this is dangerous should they be knocked off and fall onto someone downstairs and in breach of the conduct rules. Furthermore, no items can be attached to the walls in the patio, and you are requested to remove the pictures as per the photo, as this is aesthetically displeasing. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards. Stuart, Estate Manager. After that email, I was now a bit upset and determined to get my way in terms of my smoking downstairs neighbour. Cue my malicious compliance. Good day, Stuart. I'm very well. Thanks for asking. Absolutely, I will take the pictures down. Not a problem. We wouldn't want someone's vision to be irreparably damaged from the unsightly trauma that is my vintage bike picture collection. Though I must comment that I appreciate the very polite way my decor is described as aesthetically displeasing, as opposed to what that actually means. Damn, that's ugly is probably a more colloquial translation. My feelings might have been hurt otherwise. I'm very relieved I didn't go into the profession of interior decorating, which a few people I know have said I should have done, since the sudden realization that my taste in style isn't what I once thought it was. It could have been a disaster career-wise. Alternatively, what if I were to replace the photos of the bikes with a nice family portrait of my parents? Granted, they aren't supermodels, but they're attractive to me, though I may be biased in that opinion since I care for them, so I'm hoping they're not too ugly. Oops, I mean aesthetically displeasing. If that fails, maybe a reproduction of the Mona Lisa would be sufficient to meet your high standards. Tourists travel across the globe and wait in line for hours just to see it for a few minutes. Would that be allowed? I won't even charge fellow tenants for looking at it when they're walking past my balcony. Obviously, I'm being a little ridiculous and I don't mean to give you a hard time. You're just doing your job and enforcing some of the ridiculous rules that management come up with, like the communist-level restriction on personal expression and the freedom of choice to decorate and style our own property in a manner that we like. God forbid we show some individuality. Now that I think about the endless rows of identical-looking Soviet-era housing structures do have a nice seizure-inducing repetitive nature about them. While we're on the subject of decor, how is it that that plastic patio furniture is still allowed? Yes, it is patio furniture which complex rules say are allowed on patios, but damn, that is painful to look at. You know what I mean, right? That cheap white plastic stuff one buys at the furniture section at those large bulk buying stores? I find it very aesthetically displeased. Oh, screw it, it's ugly. I don't like looking at it. It comes across as tacky. Can't they be scrapped as well? I'm going off topic again. The whole point of me bringing all of this up is that a few months ago I emailed asking about a complaint I had. The complaint was that the lady who lives directly downstairs from me regularly smokes in her garden. And I, being the lover of oxygen that I am, keep my windows and patio door open for fresh air, and her smoke is constantly wafting into my apartment. Me being a non-smoker, I get quite annoyed. I asked if anything could be done about this. I was told, it's her property and her patio. She can smoke on it if she wants to. I know that health legislation stipulates that smoking within a certain distance from a designated non-smoking area is illegal. If it's good enough for public spaces, shouldn't I have that same right in my own house? Granted, I don't have designated non-smoking area signs in my flat, but I'm the only one who lives there, so I already know there's no smoking allowed. I made the rule. It would be silly to put them up inside. Should I put them up outside on my patio instead so others can see? Maybe they don't know. I don't like cigarette smoke. Actually, wait. I already know the answer to that. They're aesthetically displeasing. Forget I mentioned it. So to recap, what really gripes me is that when my neighbour smokes so close to my flat that I can practically smell what brand of cigarette she smokes, I'm told I can't do anything about it even though it might affect my health because it's her property and she can do what she likes on it. By that logic, she could host orgies on her lawn and I couldn't do anything about so long as she kept the volume down after 10 p.m. But I can't put up pictures on my patio because some people might not like the way they look, even though it is also my property, and it would be nice if I could do with it as I wanted, provided it wasn't an eyesore. Since I take a lot of pride in my flat, I wouldn't call it an eyesore as I maintain it quite well, or at least I think so. If only a person's lungs and health were as important as other people's inability to mind their own business. So, what I really want to know is there any way that my neighbour could possibly just smoke inside her flat, or at least outside the front of her flat if she insists on smoking outside where the smoke won't come into my place as easily? I would accept that too. I'm not a completely unreasonable guy. I find her smoke nasally displeasing. I normally wouldn't make such a big deal about it, but I'm starting to feel that what I'm subjected to versus what others have to be subjected to is a bit unfair. Sorry to put all this on you, Stuart. I understand it's totally not your fault. I'll still take the pictures and the pot plants down immediately. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Alex, Unit 117. I sent that reply after 6 p.m, and I did not expect him to respond until the next morning. But half an hour later, I got a reply. My email must have made an impact. Hi Alex, thank you for your email. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I do understand your frustration, and unfortunately, this is the reality of staying in such built-up complexes. I will address the issue of the smoking with your neighbour, and will revert to you. Thank you for your assistance and understanding. Kind regards, Stuart. To me, that sounded positive, so Stuart deserved a pat on the back. I sent a short reply. Thanks, Stuart. Much appreciated. You're a top-notch guy. By now, it was after 8 p.m, and I'm sure someone with a 9-to-5 desk job like Stuart should have been at home and clocked out, but he was still replying to me. Hi, Alex. I have confirmed that smoking is only allowed inside the unit or at least 5 meters from a public place, such as your balcony. I will confirm the neighbour's unit number in the morning, unless you can advise offhand, and will address her on the smoking issue. Kind regards, Stuart. I was over the moon. I ran downstairs to see what her unit number was and ran back upstairs to reply. Stuart! You've gone from being a top-notch guy to being a legend. Thanks so much. Her unit is 107. I was worried the outcome wouldn't be great and would have to accidentally bump into my pots while taking my pictures down while she was conveniently smoking in just the right position. It would be a tragic accident, of course. Cough, cough. Sorry, some smoke got into my lungs. Though that would be a lot of effort since I've already taken the plants and pictures down, and I would have to put them all up again to make the story sound believable to the police because they would no doubt interrogate me on suspected murder with a pot plant. And that's frankly too much effort. Luckily, I don't have to resort to that. Thanks again, Stuart. Your hard work has kept me out of prison. It's late. You can email her in the morning. Go home and have a beer. You've earned it. P.S. In all seriousness though, I'm totally kidding about the pot plant thing, and if the lady downstairs were to peg it in the near future, it would be completely coincidental and nothing to do with me, and I'd appreciate it if you forgot you ever spoke to me. This would be terrible evidence against me in court. I mean, I dislike smokers, but I wouldn't kill them. I'm not crazy. Regards, Alex. Sadly, that was the last I would hear from Stuart. Our correspondence stopped after that. I felt we had developed a bond, and it ended as quickly as it had begun. I only lived in that estate for another 2 years and had no more issues with the downstairs neighbour or her cigarette smoke. I now live in the suburbs in a lovely house with my wife and have no downstairs neighbours to complain about and no Stuarts to tell me what I can and can't do. I will treasure our time together. I hope wherever he is, he has our email thread printed out and pinned on his office board above his desk and thinks of me fondly whenever he looks at it. Edit. I accidentally gave away Stuart's real first name on one of the paragraphs instead of using his alias, so I have corrected it, and clarified that the pot plants were potted plants and not marijuana, though it could very well have been pot since it's legal in my country. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed, blending humour with sharp observation of the rule's absurdity. OP cleverly used sarcasm to highlight the unfairness of the situation, leading to positive results. It was both entertaining and satisfying. Story from Relic. I run the parts room at an independently owned auto body and collision repair shop. We'll call the owners Mr. and Mrs. Bossman. We do mostly insurance repairs and always have between 20 and 50 vehicles on property in various states of repair, depending on how busy we are. Once the estimate for a specific vehicle is approved, my job is primarily to order all the parts for the repair, track and receive, and organise all the parts for all ongoing repairs as they arrive, input the invoicing, and process any returns for wrong, damaged, unnecessary parts and such. Plus, IT work, because apparently I'm the only person there who knows you can just Google a problem, and somebody has usually already posted the answer on a message board from 6 years ago. I complain a lot, but in actuality I very much like my job, and I've become exceedingly good at it over the years. My co-workers are generally pretty great, there's almost no office drama, I don't usually deal with the general public, and the owners are mostly solid bosses, a husband and wife team. Mr. Bossman runs the day-to-day shop, and he is there on site pretty much every day, while Mrs. Bossman comes in periodically to do the books, which she watches like a hawk. Mr. Bossman is a decent guy so far as bosses go, but Mrs. Bossman is great. She's just one of those high personality types who's all peaches and sunshine and rainbows 90% of the time, right up until the moment something doesn't go entirely her way. At which point she drops the smile and becomes the stubbornness, immovable object you've ever butted heads against. May God help you if you actually anger her. She's not a Karen in the slightest. She's just an elemental force of nature, and you can bend like the reed or break like the twig. So I deal with Mr. Bossman on a daily basis, and only deal with Mrs. Bossman a few times a week when she needs something for accounting. My default work ethic used to be set to sack of potatoes, but that doesn't fly with the boss man, and especially not Mrs. Bossman. I have learned the hard way to be very, very proactive in my duties, which is directly why I'm now a great parts guy. Didn't take long to find out that it's just far easier and safer to be able to redirect the coming storm with knowledge and paper trails than it is to face the fury head-on with laziness and ignorance. She always says, the 3 most important rules to follow in this industry are 1. Cover your ass. 2. Cover your ass. And 3. Cover your ass. To which I'd add a 4th rule. Always send an email beginning with, per our phone call, I'd just like to remind you. Always have an email. Saved my ass so many times, becomes relevant later. And she freaking loves me because I have become exceedingly excellent at making her job easier through diligent bookkeeping. As you also might imagine, doing all this ordering and invoicing and emailing and such demands heavy use of a computer, and for years I had to make do with one that was never built nor intended for the task. It wasn't even very old, just an underpowered tablet-style budget computer originally only meant for the shop foreman to occasionally check estimates. At any given time, I had to run our estimating software plus 2 to 4 price-matching programs, and their accompanying background scanning programs, plus multiple Chrome windows for email and parts vendors and parts finder websites, plus image software to view repair photos or edit diagrams to email back and forth. The budget computer had 2 gigs of RAM and a dual-core 1.3 GHz processor. It could barely handle running Notepad if you had the main estimating software running, and it made my job painfully slow, even at the best of times. For 4 years I'd mention it to Mrs. Bossman, and it was always, "Oh right, I keep meaning to look into that," and then nothing. But that was better than bringing it up with Mr. Bossman. Mr. Bossman was a former repair technician before they opened their own shop together, so anything on the office end is already good enough until it breaks and not worth wasting more money on in his eyes. All the upgrades should be on the production side of the shop since that's what he knows well. She's much more practical about office upgrades, thankfully. Anytime I'd mention how slow my computer was and how much it was slowing down my work, he'd just laugh it off and say, "It does the job, don't it?" and walk away, far too pleased with himself. Mrs. Bossman had been going back and forth with a specific vendor that was arguing against some outstanding credits and unpaid invoices that didn't match our numbers, which means they don't match my numbers, so she came into my office to ask me to look into them as normal. But today is not normal. It's especially busy, and I'm already a day behind where I should be. Cue malicious compliance. This time, I decided that, unlike normal, my workload was light enough, that I totally had the time right then and there and could look them up for her right on the spot instead of bringing her the files later that day. This seemed urgent after all. So I began searching our database for the problem invoices and very deliberately and thoroughly went through every program I possibly could, opening every estimate and reconciliation and digital footprint to pull up any scrap of even slightly relevant information for her, so that she had all the relevant info to argue with the vendor. Each new screen freezing and pausing and loading anew. Each new refresh taking more of those long-form, time-dilated seconds to complete. Those seconds that drag on and on and on, like waiting for a traffic light to turn. I was just being properly diligent, you must understand. "Oh, here it is," I'd say, in my most matter-of-fact, perfectly normal, everything is fine and standard and typical voice. "Yeah, that part was returned back on... Oh, let me pull up the credit memo. Oh, actually, that just shows when I generated the return, but not when the vendor actually took it back. Actually, I remember this one now. The driver didn't leave a return confirmation slip, so I think I sent the vendor a reminder email about that. Let me pull that up. Yes, I told them about the issue 2 months ago, and, oh, this is a follow-up email that was part of another chain. Let me forward you both of those. And actually, I think I can still pull up the estimate here since it has the full reconciliation. Uh-oh. I hope it didn't freeze completely. Just wait a sec and it usually catches back up." She kept her smile up, but I could tell it had shifted and she was getting annoyed. "Does it always take you this long to look up the invoices?" I could tell she was getting really impatient, but she couldn't say anything about it since I was doing exactly what she'd just asked of me. And she does normally love that I'm this thorough, so long as she's not waiting in real time. "Huh? Oh yeah, this is normally like this," I said casually. "It's kind of frustrating sometimes, but Mr. Bossman doesn't want to buy another computer since this one does technically do everything I need it to do." Perfectly innocent moon eyes. "It doesn't slow me down too much, not usually." Blink, blink, puppy dog face. I continued doing this for all 5 or so problem invoices, and honestly, it was a 100% typical thing to look up, and really only took maybe 15 minutes total in the end. The only difference was making a big show of it while intentionally making it look like I wasn't making a show of it, but that was enough. "Well, I really think we need to look into getting you a new computer. This can't be good. Be good for production turnaround if it's always being this slow." Huge success. Storm of Fury successfully redirected from self to vendor, armed with time-stamped acknowledgements for every rogue charge, and finally knowing the crap I have to sit through each and every time I double-click. With all the invoices and credits properly tracked on our end, vendors' accounting had to admit the fetch-up had been on their end, and we had been billed in error. I'm not always right, but even when I'm wrong, I can usually pull up a time-dated email to make it look like I wasn't wrong. Bend a little, and the hurricane may just pass you by for a less prepared target. She waited a few weeks to find a good deal, but sure enough, I had a new computer shortly thereafter that is much more capable of running everything I need to run without derping out on me, and it's been an absolute champion. Decided to write this because it's been almost exactly 2 years working on the new machine that's still going strong. And just today, I got an unrequested raise for good performance, so I'm feeling overly pleased with me. TL, Decar. Boss man didn't want to waste money upgrading a work PC to actually handle the workload I needed it to handle. So I made his wife actually sit and watch me while I did the tasks she asked for, prompting an almost immediate upgrade. This was a masterclass in subtle but effective malicious compliance. OP played the long game, made Mrs. Boss experience the pain of working at an inefficient system firsthand, after which she realized that OP was right. As a result, OP not only got a new and efficient system, but also an unexpected raise. The execution was indeed perfect. Story from the almighty Malachi. You want it all printed out so you can read it? Sure, it's going to cost you. The first real job I had when I left college was for an aerospace company that is fairly well known for its commercial airplanes. I managed to learn fast and then streamline a lot of the processes that were holdovers from what most of my co-workers called the lazy bee down the road. One of those processes that saved an enormous amount of money was the move away from print copies to PDF review. The company went through reams upon reams of 8.5 by 11 and 11 by 17 paper every day, and we had the laser printer or copier guys out every week. Just implementing my process, I saved the company around $5,000 in the first month alone, and more every month after that as more of the engineering review and document processing moved to PDF. About 2 years into this, my boss's boss hired a guy out of Kansas who epitomized the term fake laconic. He had bounced from shop to shop and came to us because his friend had become a manager at our company. This friend being one of the few engineering leads who refused to implement the new secured PDF review system. By this time, I'd already gotten several salary promotions and was over a team of 5 other people managing their work and submitting it to my boss, who spent less time having me do the work that I was originally hired to do, and more time looking at how to automate a lot of our processes. One of those being teaching everyone to hit F7 and spend 5 minutes with a spell checker, and then setting up a script that did the same thing with every document submitted so that we didn't have to pay the FAA guys to reject our stuff based on stupid punctuation and spelling mistakes. Technically speaking, Kansas Boy was going to be an editor, which meant I needed to work with him in the submission process and get his input on the best way to integrate eyes-on review for specialty lines of business into our system. This did not go well. The first meeting I had with him, it took him over a minute to finish a sentence that, when I counted, was less than 50 words total, not including redundant words and "will" and other faked drawls. The second meeting had him saying to me, "Man, you get to slow down. You work yourself right out of a job." When, decades later, I played Red Dead Redemption 2 for the first time, I nearly quit playing the first time I heard Arthur Morgan open his mouth. If Arthur Morgan took 50 seconds to say 20 words, that was exactly how Kansas Boy spoke. Irritating was not the half of it. It did not help my perception of his being stuck in the 80s that he wore his hair in a modified mullet and wore a mustache and made sexist comments multiple times about our boss, who was a single mom with 3 kids and an actual Texas accent. Things eventually came to a head between us when he was given just enough approval power to demand that he receive print copies of the documents before he would review them. At that point, he had bogged the review process down so much that he had bottlenecked 4 projects with the intention of taking people away from my team to train properly as editors. He would work extra hours and then take work home, which, as far as I could tell, meant he would take it home and leave it on his table while he watched the football game. Since he was on an hourly wage, it also meant anything we had to have him review blew up in project hours by double the estimate. And because you had to be signed into the system to review work on my PDF system, and it tracked connection and access time, as well as when a modification was made to the document, he really didn't like using it. As for me, I was salaried and perfectly happy that way. But I ran up against this as clown taking hours and days to review things that could have been done in minutes if he just learned how to press 3 buttons, and he would refuse to do it. Eventually, I went to the director of engineering and explained what was happening, which resulted in a conversation with this guy's friend, who then went out of his way to insist that the PDF review process wasn't secure, it was, that it was inefficient, it wasn't, and that the best way to do things was the way Kansas Boy liked to do them. Months went by and the project bogged, mostly because of Kansas Boy's review process. Finally, it was down to the last week of submission, and my team had done everything they needed to do per our submission process. The director called me in on Monday and said, because this engineering lead was connected to the new project, he had the final say over how the documentation and instructions for install were going to be handled, and that my teams and I should support their team to the best of my ability. Then he invited me to play golf with him that weekend. I don't play golf. I have never played golf. I can play manifold with 4 shots of ouzo and a can of beer in my hand, but the last time I played golf, I hit a caddy with a golf ball on the previous hole. Twice. Nobody knows how. The point is that inviting me to play golf is like asking a basketball player to play professional llama polo. You don't do it unless there's another reason that doesn't involve watching very tall men avoid getting bitten by irritated camelids and laughing. Then I got a memo, written on actual paper in a time of email, from Kansas Boy about a meeting to discuss the submission issues. By lunch, I had had 4 hours of meetings with Kansas and his lead, referred to by most of the people in the company as Duchy, a reference both to his being a French-Canadian citizen and, well, a douche, who were laying out very smugly their requirements for how they were submitting all their documents. Having been given carte blanche to run this project to completion, they sat there and dictated exactly how it was all going to go down. All of their documents were due by Friday afternoon. Over 700,000 pages of reports, assessments, drawings, installation manuals, etc. For personal review of every page by Kansas Boy and his paid intern, who was the only person that hadn't quit after being transferred to his team. It was impressed upon me that this project was under the eye of the president of the company itself, and they insisted they all be printed out, completely in paper. These arrogant schmucks were all but picking nuts out of their shit-eating grins at the end of the meeting. I should mention that at this point, there were so few printers used in the company that the massive copier printer in the file archive was the only one really capable of handling the load. Everything else was the standard small office laser printer setup with less than 3 reams of paper usable. To wit, the amount of printing they wanted to do would take about the full capacity of the whole company's printing capacity unless we hired an external contractor to do it, which couldn't happen in the short turnaround time they had. And since my purview at that point included the production of documentation, it technically fell into my lap to make it happen. They also told me that if I managed to complete by Friday, the company would get a bonus from our client, which was incredibly important, as this was a client we wanted to impress to get more business from in the future. And not coincidentally, our company's profit-sharing incentives would reward the people who made that happen at the end of the year, meaning that the 2 of them would get bonuses for being the face of this particular project, while everyone who actually made it happen would get a $5 Starbucks gift card. Yeah. Tuesday, I had pulled all 10 of my team members off their projects and retasked them to printing everything. We commandeered every single printer in the building, including the president's personal laser printer and the photocopier his secretary used. I had them working overtime 4 hours a night with pizza and beer, with stacks of toner, reams of paper, and repurposed the biggest conference rooms with laptops and printers, and parked myself in the file archives with the big beast to run the majority of the work. At the end of the week, we had more angry complaints. Hey man, this is the project Kansas Boy and Duchy tasked us to do. If you need to have a conversation, I suggest you take it up with them. Ranging from the conference room being occupied by our operation to lack of printing supplies, staples, and overloaded print queues for almost everything. At one point, the FAA guy who was in charge of the project stepped in and demanded to know when he could print out his files, which were needed to actually submit all this crap. We made it happen on Thursday night with 3 hours to spare before the deadline of Friday morning, Greenwich Standard Time. This is Pacific Standard Time. We delivered the whole thing to Kansas Boy's 6-foot by 6-foot cubicle, all 700,000 pages of it in boxes and boxes of paper, stacked precisely in his cube so as to prevent any blocking of the emergency egress, as per our ISO 9000 and safety protocols. And we provided an electronic copy of everything we would submit normally to the FAA guy, whose responsibility it was to review everything before submission. But more to the point, to review anything that deviated from the normal submission package that was either a client request or a new submission methodology. Anything new or modified, he only wanted to have print copies of the changed pages. I want to be clear. While we did block Kansas Boy's desk almost completely, this was not the malicious part. When I came into the job, one of the new hires in my orientation class had a tradition of taking a tiny vector line art drawing figure of his alma mater's mascot and adding it to every single file. It was never significant enough to be seen even on a full plot of an engineering drawing, but that was his running joke for every single drawing he worked on. The engineering state university that was the rival to his school also had a few engineers that worked at our company, and they began putting their mascot in vector line art into their drawings. Then someone who had a different sense of humor, cough cough, made one from a popular animated cartoon of the 1980s that, at a certain size, looked absolutely nothing like a robot that turned into a jet plane and more like a very small standard metric butt, and made it available in the library of standard parts as a do not use this model part for a drawing template. None of these things are kosher to include on an official engineering specification, even in drawing form. Even if the plotter at maximum size cannot determine if it is a school mascot or a maple leaf or a goofy robot toy from the 1980s. The only reason that the company got away with it was because nobody was stupid enough to resize all of the CAD components to show exactly what every single part was supposed to look like. Once I realized what would happen if it ever came out, or the models made it through to submission, I had the engineers who did this as a game go through their old drawings and take their little mascots out, and ask them to pass it on to anyone who did the same. Being able to search the engineering database by part number meant I could also flag those drawings for editing and have the people responsible for them take them out. Unfortunately, nobody knew that someone, cough cough, Ducci, cough cough, had included his own little vector art thing, which was a maple leaf with a naked woman spread-eagled, wielding a hockey stick in front of her crotch. It never made it into the primary database of templates because the engineering team and template review group I had set up for that purpose never received a copy of the template set from Dutchy's group because he refused to use the standard templates because they weren't up to his standard. Nor did we know he had left it on every single one of the templates he demanded his team use, because he was still one of the holdouts who refused to use the system to check drawings in and out of the main database until he had approved them from his team. He did, however, check them into the database of approved drawings once they had been submitted to both the client and the FAA, meaning that the copies of the most recent files were on record. But as far as participating in the rest of it, nope. His excuse was that his team worked better that way. And yet that meant, of course, that any given part that he chose a specific ID number for would often conflict with other part numbers in the database, which would then result in a meeting to iron out the fact that he was ignoring the convention everyone else used, meaning check the database to make sure you weren't creating two identical part numbers for two completely different parts in your drawing. To add insult to injury and irritation for his team members, he also placed his name on almost every single one, regardless of who had done the drawing, which meant that anyone who needed information about the project had to go through him instead of checking with the person who built the model in the first place. Ducci had more turnover on his team than anywhere else in the company for multiple reasons. But the fact that he would routinely take credit for engineering drawings, he didn't do at a company that tended to use how many you did as a metric for your job performance, was a huge one. His insistence on making extra work that didn't actually help the client was another. And his general assholery towards anyone who told him no was another, especially those who used it when he told them they had to work through the weekend because his team was behind again on their projects. This big, huge project was no exception to his make-work idiocy. As part of the submission for this particular project, Ducci had demanded to have a full catalogue of every single modelled part and component printed up and submitted with every single engineering drawing so that the client, who hadn't asked for it, would be able to determine which part they needed. His rationale was that because we were the source supplier for 60% of the parts included, we could make sure they knew we were the only ones they could buy them from. And the one thing Ducci had decided to actually allow to be automated in this process? A script that expanded every single component on the engineering drawing to full 8.5 by 11-inch page size and submitted it as part of the official engineering parts list. You might see where this is going. I had taken Friday off, but in Monday morning, I got a call from the VP's personal assistant to come into the office for an important meeting. On Friday afternoon, I walked into the conference room next to my director's office. My director had the most poker-faced expression I have ever seen on his face when he opened the door and let me in to one of the loudest ass-chewings I ever have walked in on before or since. The FAA rep, the president of the company, the VP over our department, Kansas Boy, and Ducci were all sitting around the table. The FAA rep, a generally fairly genial, round-bellied man, was yelling at Ducci and Kansas Boy at the top of his lungs about how serious this matter was and how ridiculous they would make the company look, and that if he submitted this garbage, the fact that he let it through would at the very least require a full review of every single document he had approved while working with our company. When there was a pause in the barrage, my director asked me if I knew if there were any non-standard drawings or cartoons in our engineering database of CAD files. I said, well, yeah. Those are the template example parts that are removed automatically from the template when someone copies it to their local drive. They're just there as examples. They're labeled that way too. Nobody actually keeps those, and they can't. They're deleted from the drawing immediately when someone saves a local copy of the template. And that's when the VP, a woman in her mid-40s brought in to change the heavy bro culture of our company, said, "You actually keep this as an example in your template database?" and held up a full ream's worth of blown-up Canadian hockey porn vector line art images with a really obnoxious themed pun as the part number, framed beautifully in an engineering 3D isometric part view. My jaw dropped open, and I think I made some odd noises that could have been mistaken for strangled laughter. Kansas Boy and Ducci tell us you're responsible for maintaining the full engineering part database system. So if the buck stops with you, this is on you to explain to everyone here what this is doing here. Can you honestly say you've never seen this image before in your database? I shot a look at both Kansas Boy and Ducci, who were both looking at me the way a chicken watches someone with an axe walking across the farmyard to the grindstone. Because I had seen a full blown-up copy of that image coloured in with highlighter on Kansas Boy's desk and said, "Yeah, you probably should take that down. That's not appropriate for a workplace environment," before getting a long drawn-out drawled explanation of where a stick was and why I should pull it out of my ass. He knew I knew where I'd seen it before. And while I didn't know where Kansas Boy had gotten it from, I could make an educated guess. And they both knew I had zero inclination to even pretend to take a hit for them. The bus was rolling downhill, and while I wasn't throwing them under it like they'd tried to throw me, I sure as shit wasn't going to push them out of the way. My jaw worked a few more times before I said, "Yes, I can honestly say it does not exist in the engineering database, now or ever. I can show you what does exist and the history of created part numbers. I know for certain that part number does not exist. Here," and pulled up the template database on my director's computer. We went through the full template database using every iteration of that particular part number until the VP was satisfied. Then she asked me, "And you and your team never saw this while you were doing all the printing this week?" I can't speak to anyone else, but if we had seen it, we would have flagged it. We would have immediately brought it to the attention of the reviewer of the schematic, Kansas Boy, and the engineer whose name is on the drawing, Ducci, to have it removed immediately. We can run a search in the full engineering database to see where this part number shows up on all drawings, so long as we make sure to search for all hidden part numbers. Ducci said, "Oh no, that would take way too much time. We can't do that. We have to submit this by the end of day today." Kansas Boy, in one of the speediest possible sentences I had ever heard come out of his mouth, said the exact same thing. The president, who had been glowering in the corner, said, "This project is on hold until we determine exactly how compromised these engineering drawings are, and every single drawing that this part shows up on must be resubmitted and reviewed by at least 3 people, one of whom is going to be the lead engineer who signed off on every one of these, and at least one senior manager of engineering who isn't involved. We aren't this kind of company." Ducci and Kansas Boy actually went white at that, and both started looking at me with this pleading expression. The axe was sharpened to a razor's edge, and now it was down to whether fried chicken or duck a la orange was on the menu. The president looked at me and said, "Run the search?" "I don't care how long it takes. I want a copy on VP's desk in print of every drawing with this part in our database, and one for everyone in this room, along with who created the drawing, who reviewed it, and who approved it." Now, I'm one of the only people in the company who had admin access to the engineering part database because I helped create it, and I set an automated rule that forced everyone who used it to change their password once a month to a new 16 or more character string with symbols and numbers. I knew for a fact nobody who had access to it was in the office except me. So did my director, who did have access but kept forgetting the code, and eventually told me just to take him off the list because, as he put it, "I know just enough to be dangerous." I said, "Absolutely. It will probably take at least 6 hours. Do you want me to stay late to finish it?" The director looked at me after checking with the VP and president and said, "No, you and your team already clocked over 80 hours each this week dealing with this deadline. Take the weekend and get it to us by Monday afternoon." Now, Kansas Boy and Ducci are looking like they need to get up, but they're being held back. So I grabbed a secured laptop from one of the IT guys that I used for maintaining the database, headed to the IT department's secure server room, plugged it in to run overnight, logged into my account, started the compilation, locked the screen with an authentication dongle, pulled it from the USB port, stuck it in my pocket, then headed home. About 10 minutes after I left, I began getting panicked phone calls from my work number on my mobile. Then I began getting email notifications. Since the director had my number and he would just call me from his mobile and would give it to the VP and president if they needed it, I knew it was Kansas Boy and Ducci. So I ignored it, because them. The next day, I went golfing with my director as part of a charity golf event he had been working on, and, as it turned out, the president and his wife, who all agreed that my golfing was utterly terrible and laughably so. They kept me around for the rest of the evening for dinner and a charity auction, and got me drunk enough that they called me a cab and had a valet from the club drive my car home for me. Sunday I spent recuperating. Monday morning, I went into the office, opened up the IT server room, and found the laptop I had left plugged in missing. After checking with the IT crew, they let me know that Kansas Boy had insisted on Saturday morning that he needed to get the laptop to provide a critical list to the president by the end of the day. By Saturday afternoon, he had browbeat the help desk guy making barely $15 an hour into letting him in to check on it. But after an hour, said he was done and left. When I went by Dutchy's desk on my way to the director's office, right after I found out about the laptop incident, he and Kansas Boy were talking at his desk. Kansas gave me a huge shit-eating smirk and then laughed. Ducci still looked worried, but less so. When I walked out of my director's 5-minute closed-door session, my director said, "You know you didn't have to make print copies, and you didn't have to come in Saturday morning to do it. You could have just sent us a PDF file." Yeah, but you know Kansas Boy and Ducci like their print copies. and I walked over to hand 2 thick wedges of printed database info to both Kansas and Ducci. Looking right at them, I said, "Besides, I was up early on Saturday anyway for the golf tournament, and I had to give President his laser printer back. Might as well make some last copies before it all goes back to normal." When I dropped off the list, I said, "Yeah, I gave everyone else their copies Saturday morning." On that list was every single engineering drawing from Dutchy's team. Ducci had put his name on every single piece of paper his team had produced as either the originating engineer or the approving engineer. Kansas Boy was the reviewer of record. Over 40,000 engineering drawings last and present had their porno maple leaf part in them. From the project itself, there were nearly 150,000 pages of documentation referencing those drawings and using the line vector art from those files. By noon, both Ducci and Kansas Boy's desks were completely empty. Dutchy had been fired and frog-marched from the building. Kansas Boy saw the writing on the wall and managed to submit his letter of resignation right before HR finished the paperwork. I left that company a few years later, and I'd like to say they never worked in aerospace again. But the reality is that both were working for a major airplane manufacturer within months of this story. And that's why I quit working aerospace. Clarifying edit. If you don't understand why having this little thing that you can't even see on an engineering drawing is such a major issue, even if you can't see it, the models that are submitted sometimes have full vector CAD drawings exported as part of the package, which include any and all content on the drawing. Any non-compliant drawing in violation of FAA regulations can be rejected en masse per FAA regs, and they can ground an entire fleet if they think you need to use the Oxford comma in a sentence describing how a toilet seat needs to be installed. Combine that with the fact that an FAA rep has to manually review every submitted drawing with a change made to it for any in-service airplane. Then, see the change that was made. Get an explanation as to why the change was made. Approve or reject the change. Submit the change to the FAA for full approval. Submit an integration request to the documentation for the specific aircraft in question on all records using that vector graphic across all owned manuals and documentation sets, which is quite a large amount, and that the costs for this process could easily run into the $1,000 range per drawing change made after several years, which are almost always borne by the company that made the error. Yeah, so pulling all of Dutchy's former drawings for inspection was not a small thing. This isn't a one-off mistake of, haha, that's funny. It's more of a $6 million up in 2002 figures that in several cases made it into the official FAA documentation for some of the aircraft still in service today as a passenger airline and commercial cargo carrier. Remember the Boeing 737 MAX scandal? Yeah, I'm not surprised at all by that for the simple fact that when this happened, the company I worked for quietly looked into what it would take to correct this little and then kicked it under the carpet. And this happens all the time. This malicious compliance was masterful. It is the perfect example of what malicious compliance is. Every move was executed flawlessly. Every unethical and illegal action of the boss was documented, which ensured boss's downfall and OP remained untouchable. The story from Mr. Big Daddy 93. This was over 20 years ago, so some of the details and dialogue may be a little fuzzy, as the years have not been kind. This is a 2-part malicious compliance, so it is long. Enjoy. On mobile, yada yada yada, cast. Assistant principal, teacher. An old walrus, mama, me, teen dad. Backstory. I was a teen dad when I started high school. As such, Mama told me that I had to be home to take care of my son on the weekends. She did say that during the week, that if I could not find a babysitter for him, then she would watch him while I was at school for the cost of extra chores. But I had to try to find a babysitter first, because she was not going to raise any grandchildren. If I can make the baby, then I can raise the baby. So I did the best I could, by asking at church on Sunday if one of the ladies would be willing to watch my son during the week while I was at school. But there were some days the sitter I had lined up cancelled last minute, leaving me no choice but ask Mama to help me out, causing me to be late to school and costing me more chores. For the first 3 months, I had dealt with ISS, in-school suspension, lunch detention, and the paddle on a number of occasions. And each time I tried to explain, the explanation fell on deaf ears. This time was going to be different. Story? I woke up every morning at 4:30 and did my chores, got ready for school, and got my son ready to go to the sitters. I went to the sitters with my son about 7:30, only to be told that my son could not stay for that day for some reason or another. That went on every day since day one. So I drove all the way back home to ask Mama if she could watch my son for the day. It took 15 minutes one way, so 30 minutes round trip. Me? Mama, can you watch son for me? Mama? OP, why are you not at school? Did you take him to the sitters? Me? Yes, ma'am. But she said that she has an appointment in state capital, and she could not watch him today. Please, Mama, I'm already late. Mama? Okay, OP, I'll do it, but you are doing dishes tonight. I gave baby to Mama and drove the 20 minutes to school. Every day the sitter had a different excuse, and it wound up costing me some extra chores to pay Mama for watching the baby. First night, dishes. Second night, laundry. Third night, cooking supper. Fourth night, more dishes. Fifth night, cooking supper. By the time I got to school, it was almost 9, and first period was almost over. I go into the office to get my pass to go to class. Monday. Thursday, nothing happened. I got my pass and went to class. I gave the pass to the teacher and accepted the scolding from the teacher. Friday morning, however, when I went in the office to get the pass, principal called me into his office. I walked in his office. Principal, assistant principal, and teacher are in there waiting for me. Principal, OP, please have a seat. I do, and he continues. OP, teacher tells me that you have been late to class all week. You know that all students must be here at or before 8 o'clock. We have had this discussion before, have we not? Now, do you care to explain why you are late every day? Me. Yes, sir. We have had this discussion before, and every time we have, I have told you every time that I have a hard time getting a sitter. Assistant principal, interrupting me. That is no excuse. What does you needing a sitter for your siblings have to do with you being late every day? Teacher, yeah, I am tired of hearing that excuse. Now, you are in my class Monday morning on time, or you will be sorry. Do I make myself clear? Then he walks out before I could answer him. Assistant principal, well, I'm waiting. Tapping her foot. You better answer me now, young man. Me, well, ma'am, I don't need a sitter for my siblings. I need a sitter for my son. Had you not interrupted me, I would have told you that. Assistant principal was mad that I had the nerve to talk to her like that. However, principal spoke up before assistant principal could get her words out. Principal, OP. Watch how you speak to assistant principal. Or do you need to have another talk with the paddle? I think since you want to be late all week and then lie about it and speak so rudely to assistant principal, you can have Saturday detention for the next 4 weeks. You will not be late. You will not make excuses. And you will apologize to assistant principal for your rude behavior. Do I make myself clear? Me? Yes, sir. I understand. To assistant principal. Assistant principal, I'm sorry for being rude and disrespectful. Principal, good. Be here at 7:45 in the morning. 1 minute late and you will have to deal with the truancy officer. Am I clear? Good. Now get out of my office and get to class. I got up and left. I started to hatch a plan to show them how unreasonable they were being and that I was not lying about having a child. So when I got home, I told Mama what happened and my whole plan. After taking the punishment for getting in trouble at school, she laughed and told me to be careful and not raise the hornet's nest too badly. The Malicious Compliance Part 1. Since I had to spend all day Saturday and Sunday with my son, well, you can see where this is going. I packed my son's diaper bag with everything he would need for 5 hours, grabbed my bag that I put together the night before, loaded up in the car, Then had my brother drop us off at the school at 7:30. Detention started at 8. I told my brother the plan on the way, and we had a good laugh all the way there. Since my son and I were 15 minutes early, we sat on the bench outside of the front door of the school. We really didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes. Assistant and principal came walking up carrying their Dunkin' Donut coffee. They saw my son and I, then principal said, "Principal, OP, I said 7:45. What are you doing here early? And why do you have your baby brother here? No children allowed. Take him home and get back here by 8 o'clock. Now." Me. "Sir, you did say that I have to be here by 7:45. I didn't want to be late for detention for being late, so I got here at 7:30. He is not my brother. He is my son." I pulled out the unofficial copy of his birth certificate, with father's name section highlighted, and showed him. "See, sir, it says right here, father's name, OP. It takes 20 minutes to get home, 5 minutes to drop him off, 60 minutes to explain to Mama why he's not with me, 20 minutes to get back, and on top of that, I would have to wait 30 minutes for my brother to come get me, so I can take him home. So all in all, 2 hours, 15 minutes round trip to comply with your orders. It is 7:40 now, sir. By the time I do all of that, it will be 9:55. So no, sir, I cannot follow that order. As I would is 1 hour, 55 minutes late getting back. Sorry, sir." Principal was P.Ed that I had the nerve to talk back to authority. He stomped off and unlocked the doors of the school. Assistant principal, "We will be calling Mama to come get the child. Don't think you can get away with this sort of behaviour." We go in. They call Mama and told her how rude and disrespectful I was being and that she needed to come get my son. To which Mama told them, relayed to me by Mama after I got home. Mama, really? That sounds like your problem. It also sounds to me like you are the ones that are being rude and disrespectful. That is OP's child. It is his time to spend with his son. If you don't like it that OP brought his son with him, then maybe believe him when he tells you something. Don't bother me again over some BS because you get your feelings hurt. Grow a spine and grow up. That was that. They didn't bother me or my son for the rest of the detention time. I brought my son with me for the whole 4 Saturday detentions. After that, I never received another Saturday detention. The Malicious Compliance Part 2T had told me the Friday before the first Saturday detention that I had better be on time for his class, that next Monday. So step 2 of my plan, activated. I called all of my other teachers Sunday and told them what I was going to do for the rest of the term. It was about 8 weeks before Christmas break. They were on board with it, but told me that if my son started to disrupt class, then they would have to ask me to abandon the malicious compliance. I agreed, and the next morning, I also told the lady at church, which kept leaving me stranded without a sitter, I would no longer be asking or paying for her as a babysitter. She was mad, but I don't care. I did the normal stuff. Woke at 4:30, did my chores, ate breakfast, got ready for school, got my son ready, with enough things for 10 hours as I figured I would have ASD, after school detention, got in the car, and instead of going to the sitters, went to school. I was on time, 7:40. I go in the office with my son, who was asleep, and got him a visitor's pass. The receptionist laughed when I told her why I needed a visitor's pass instead of a tardy slip. I took the pass and go to first period, physical science, the class that I was always late for. I walk in, take my seat and wait for first bell. Of course, all the girls and some of the guys in the class are going gaga over my son. Even some of the snobby girls are talking to me. First bell rings, 8 o'clock. Teacher walks in and starts taking attendance, gets to my name. Teacher. OP. Well, I guess he doesn't care about my class again. That's it, I'm done with his tardiness. Class, I'll be back. Before he can get out the door, me. Present, sir. Teacher. Well, you decided to be on time after all. So what's your excuse this time? Why have you decided today of all days to grace us with you being on time? Me. Well, sir, if you care to remember Friday in principal's office that you wanted me here on time, no excuses. Then you left before I could acknowledge your order, sir. So, sir, I am here on time as you ordered with my son, since you did not believe me when I said that I could not find a babysitter, sir. His face turned blood red. He was pued by my answer. He continued to take attendance, then turned to me and started barking something. All I could make out was, "Office, how dare you? Call baby and detention." All his yelling woke up my son, who started crying. I stood up, got my things and son, and said, "Me. Sir, look what you went and done. You woke up the baby. I hope you are happy now, sir." Then I went into the hall, but not before hearing all my classmates agreeing with me. After I got my son calmed down, teacher came out in the hall and with a calmer tone, "Teacher, OP, please explain why you brought your brother with you to my class. I told you that I wanted you on time, not your whole damn family." Me? "Sir, he is not my brother. He is my son. Shows copy of birth certificate." The sitter has not helped me at all. That is the reason I'm always late. By the time I turn around and convince Mama to help me with him, I'm late for your class. But please, sir, if you want to give me detention or any other punishment, that's fine, and I will take it. But please, sir, please don't shout or cuss. It's not good for you. It's not good for us. And more importantly, it's not good for my son, who will be joining us for the rest of the term. Teacher. What? Through gritted teeth. Office now. So I, my son and teacher make our way to principal's office. Teacher goes in and tells principal something. Principal comes out, sees me and sighs. Principal. OP, come in. Leave your child there? Me. Yes, sir, I'll come in. But no, sir, I will not leave my son unattended. I go in, pushing my son's stroller. Principal. OP teacher said that while you were on time, that you were being disrespectful and insubordinate. Not to mention that you think it is okay for a child to come to school. What for the rest of the term? You, young man, are about to learn a lesson. That children do not belong in school and that you cannot get away with disrespecting authority or rules. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? Me? Sir, if children do not belong in school, then why in the hell are we forced to come? I have no other choice but to bring my son with me. I don't have a babysitter. Mama won't help me out. Remember, she said she would, but only in extreme cases and for me doing more chores, and have ran out of options. Now, if you are going to punish me for something, then I think it best to wait until my attorney gets here, to make sure that the punishment fits the charges and is a fair carry of justice. Or you can proceed and have a lawsuit and lose your position with the Board of Education. Your choice, sir. I know my rights as a citizen of country. Teacher was shocked. Principal, after much thought. OP, let's not get attorneys involved. Let's go back to where you said that you have no choice but to bring him with you. Do you care to expand on that? Why does he not live with his mother and her family? Me? Yes, sir. The reason I have no choice but bring him with me is because the babysitter I hired is useless, Mama is too busy, and I can't afford to pay her to watch him. The reason he doesn't live his mom or her family is because she and her family gave up their rights and claim of him. Her family said that they don't want a bastard in their family, and she is in state women's facility for assault and attempted murder. So, you see, there is no other choice. Teacher. OP, if that is true about his mother, then why is he not in the care of Child Protection Services? Why do you have custody? Me. Because, sir, the same reason why I have an attorney on retainer. If you have any further questions about the matter, you can contact my attorney. Teacher was silent after that. After a really long discussion, I went on about my day. The other teachers were okay with my son being in their class. I contacted my attorney when I got home from school. He contacted the Board of Education and got them to agree that my son could indeed attend classes with me until I either found a babysitter or finished the term due to my situation. I ended up changing schools before we went back after New Year's. I did find a wonderful babysitter who was available when I needed her, for a really great rate. Also, I ended up having to retake physical science as I had failed at the first school, but ended up passing the class with an 87B. People think it is hard to be an adult, married, and have a child. I only wish I could have complained about that. That is easy compared to my experience in high school. Note, when I say I drove to school, I had my learner's permit. My brother, 20 at the time, was the one who was teaching me how to drive for a fee. I didn't trust my son to just anyone. So I would be late to school, despite the fact I knew the penalty for doing so. There were consequences at home for me getting in trouble at school. My learner's permit was taken when I got Saturday detention. Waking up at 4:30 to do chores before going to school, we lived on a dairy farm. Why go inside to call mama? This was back before everyone had a mobile phone. Paddle, WTF. It was in a school district that paddled students up to graduation, with parents' permission. It was not uncommon to hear of seniors getting paddled one day before graduation, but only if the offence called for the paddle. My next go-around with physical science class was after lunch. So I had plenty of time to be there. I found out from a friend at the old school that principal and assistant principal was fired for having personal relations with each other in principal's office during school hours. Which explains a lot. Teacher retired at the end of the school year. Good riddance, you old walrus. Thanks for reading. I know it was a lot, but sorry to bore you with a long story. If you have any questions about anything in the story, please feel free to ask. The malicious compliance was flawless, turning unfair punishment into a powerful statement. By forcing the school to confront reality, it exposed their rigid rules. The administration had no choice but to relent. Story from Just Serverisms. I don't want my server to have a sense of humor. I have worked as a server for more than 5 years, so I have several malicious compliances, petty revenge, and other kinds of stories. I figure this one is memorable enough for me to start my Reddit journey with, because it has a dash of entitled parent and petty revenge. It's a long one because it's a two-parter, so I'll pop a TL, DR at the end. So some background. When I first started serving, I figured that the best way for me to approach it was with humor. The way I saw it, most people were out there to have a decent meal and enjoy it. And because I have an odd sense of humor, this meant I came up with some pretty weird but ultimately harmless jokes. For example, if anyone ordered coffee, I'd bring them their scalded bean juice and bovine drippings. When they paid, I'd tell them we accepted cash, card, or your immortal soul. And when they used the machine, I'd say, just make sure that number is correct. If it isn't, then my automatic computing chip has critically failed. Please restart server.exe. Or some other lines. Because I've been doing it for a while, I kept the delivery easy, so people knew I was joking and I had a bunch of material. Some didn't really pay attention, especially when paying, so it went over their heads. Few didn't really care one way or another, but most times I'd get a laugh. Because of this, I rarely got complaints. Some people didn't like my sense of humor, and I understood that, but at best, they just wouldn't tip. No biggie. Except for this one customer who we'll call EP for entitled parent. EP was seated at my table with his wife and 2 kids. One kid looked a little sad when I first approached their table, so I thought that it'd be a perfect opportunity. When I brought them their drinks, I made sure to be as humorous as I could. Me, here's the cow juice, both from a white cow and brown one. Sorry for the delay, we had a utter disaster milking them. K1 and K2 giggle. Me, and then the caustic aqua to burn your dried leaves, as well as some dismembered citrus. NM looks confused for a moment, but then I see the O moment and a smile. Me. Lastly, your dihydrogen monoxide in its solid and liquid forms. EP, however, looks as sour as the lemon slices. EP. Excuse me? What did you say this was? NM. Really? Me. Why, it's the essence of life itself. And something that came out of the dinosaurs years ago. Just filtered super well. Cue more giggles from the kids, but the EP looked really annoyed. Thankfully, NM, for nice mom, stopped him from doing anything by saying, "Honey, it's water. You know, H2O." After that, the meal went relatively quietly. I got their food orders, brought them it when it came out hot and fresh. No clever lines there. The menu was too big to come up with something for everything, though I did try for the kids. I checked on them twice to make sure the food was good, even got to chatting with the wife and kids for a bit. EP was silent the whole time, only really nodding when I asked if his food was good or holding out his glass for more water. I didn't mind him too much though, because I thought that it was the end of it. I brought them the bill with the usual joke of cash, card, and firstborn children up at the front whenever you're ready. And even NM joked back, "Guess kid one is doing the dishes." Next time I had stopped by the table, EP was up at the front paying, while the kids drew on the kids' menus and NM watched them. NM thanked me for my great attitude, handing me a $7 tip for cheering up her kids. Turns out the family dog had a vet visit and the kids were worried. I just told her that I was more than happy to help take their mind off it, and I hoped they came back soon. That should have been the end of it, except that it wasn't. Because while NM was thanking me, it turns out EP was complaining to the shift manager, saying stuff like, and I'm paraphrasing because I heard this after from my manager, "OP is obnoxious, makes stuff up, important for later, and won't stop talking. I just want to get my meal, not have to deal with a brat annoying my family." She even suggested I pay with my kids. The general gist of his complaint was that he just wanted a server who was bland, made no jokes, handed them their food, and walked away. What made him a real EP was that he demanded a discount and free dessert for his kids for his trouble. This being the food service industry, where customer is king, my manager caved like wet tissue paper and personally brought the dessert. This being a place I've worked for years and I had a good relationship with my manager, we both just chatted about how much of a dick this guy was after he was gone. Now, here's where the MC comes in. Fast forward to about a month later. I'm working the afternoon shift on a Wednesday. It's in the dead period, and there's about a couple hours at the start of my shift where I'm the only one in the front of the house, and my manager is in the back counting last shift's cash. I'm basically alone, save for the cook, who isn't allowed up at the front, so when EP and his family come in, I can't immediately seat them because I'm taking food out. Still, New Mexico and kids were excited to see me, while behind them, EP stares at me like I'm a shit stain on a napkin. I can tell he remembers me, and more importantly, I remember him and his complaint. His mistake is going to the washroom while I sat his family. It was the start of my shift, so I was still in a really good mood. I asked how they were. Kid 1 said that the dog was doing much better, and Kid 2 asked if he could have some brown udder juice. NM ordered herself a peppermint tea and a coffee for EP. As I sat them, I told them that I was going to do something different today. I told the kids weren't mad at them, I promise. NM was confused, but I just smiled and winked before I left to get their drinks. By the time that I had the drinks, EP was there and waiting. Perfect. I slowed my pace from my usual speed into a slow march. The kids look up at me, clearly expecting. EP, we're not ready to order yet. Me, completely emotionless. Very well, sir. Here is your coffee. Tea, peppermint, milk, chocolate, juice, orange. 3 waters. 1 water, no ice. 4 creamers. Sugar is in the caddy on your wife's right. Is there anything else you require of me? EP, number. The kids and NM were confused. I had done a total 180 from peppy jokester to monotonous robot, and I was only gone for a couple minutes. But I just turned 90 degrees to the right and went to another table, where I dropped the act and went back to being me. This went on for a little while, as EP wasn't ready to order the next 2 times I stopped, even though his kids already knew what they wanted. I was neutral every time I stopped by their table, and then went right back to being fun around the other 2. I chatted with one regular about some of the games he was playing, and an older couple about their kids. But with EP's table? Nada. NM asked me to put the order for appetizers, and I complied. Funnily enough, It was the same appetizer the older couple had, so they could hear me say to them, 6 hush puppies to a good home in warm stomach acids, only to bring theirs and say, hush puppy, 6. Naturally, by the time I stopped at EP's table with the appetizer, no one was happy. The kids wanted to hear the jokes from me to them, not overheard. Even EP was annoyed because I was way nicer and warmer to other tables. But NM asked the question I was waiting for. NM, OP, how come you're joking with everyone but us? Last time, we got the best service I've ever had in chain diner. EP, get me your manager now. I refuse to be ignored when I'm just here to eat with my family. I, in fact, made no move to get my manager, but carefully schooled my expression to something neutral and kept my tone as calm as can be. But sir, last time you insisted to my manager while was paying that I be factual, concise, and as non-intrusive. As I recall, you found my behaviour annoying to you and your family. Instantly, NM and his kids looked right at him. He immediately went red. EP, that's not what I said. I said that the service was great. Me, actually, sir, and allow me to remind you that you insisted I not make stuff up. You complained that I wouldn't stop talking and found my humour offensive, particularly the part where you claimed I suggested you pay with your children. And my manager offered you 25% off, as well as a free dessert as recompense. NM, what? EP said that you offered it because you felt bad about our dog. Me, while I would have liked to, I did not. So my behaviour today is in alignment with his previous complaint. At this point, the kids were upset and NM was furious. She asked me to give them a couple minutes with their order, and I just nodded and left. I did see NM and EP head out of the restaurant for a bit, and NM returned after a bit alone. As it turns out, EP is a serial complainer to try and get discounts and free food from restaurants, and NM was very upset that not only he pulled it again, but on their new favourite server. So he was off to eat alone at the Golden Arches, and I was back to joking and cheering the kids up. I apologised for my behaviour, and the meal went on like normal. I got another complaint from this guy from our customer surveys, and this time the manager said that I was out of line, but I thought it was worth it. Besides, NM and the kids came in every now and then after that, asking if I was serving. Personally, I think the guy was just mad that he didn't know that H2O is water. TLDR, EP complains that the server jokes too much with his family, so next visit they get a bland robot who calls him out. Edit, thanks for the gold. I did not expect this to explode overnight, and I know a lot of people find my humour annoying, and I get that. I'm also the kind of person who wants a server to leave me alone when I'm out eating. And since humour is subjective, I know that it can be hit and miss. A lot of people didn't pay much mind, some laughed, but I rarely got people who really complained, even in 5 years of working. Plus, I usually lead with the water or coffee. If a table wasn't receptive, I'd drop it. When I'm working, I tend to joke more with those who are receptive of it, and when there's time. Since my diner is near a university, I usually get students, families, and older folk, as opposed for SRS business types, so the jokes kind of grew from the people I interacted with. It also means that during food rushes, it gets really fast-paced, so I usually don't have the time. I played it up for that table because the kids and mom loved it. Edit 2. Thank you all for the comments. I understand that my humour isn't for everyone. Usually I have one greeting joke, but if a table isn't receptive to it, I'd move on and be a regular server. I'm not the type who will push through and be joking 100% of the time. The reason I continued with this table was that the wife and kids were enjoying it and they liked chatting with me. Had all of them not been interested or the guy just asked me to stop, I would have dropped it. Instead, he made up a complaint that I was annoying his family and demanded discounts and free stuff. The malicious compliance was executed perfectly. By calmly and professionally switching to a bland, robot-like demeanour, the server highlighted the inconsistency in the customer's complaints. It was more than perfect. The story from Shoegazer Slut. I work at a hospital that doubles as a research institution. Since I'm on the research side, I have to involve lots of other departments, and most people with whom I work with are very chill and understand that I have to beseech them for things to do my job. I'm one of those "she can go 100 hectares on a single tank of kerosene" types of people, and I'm very on top of things, for which my co-workers value me. However, the one place where that camaraderie breaks down is with some of the nurses who work in my specific clinic, focusing on one particular disease. Honestly, I've done a good job making most of the nurses like me. I bring them homemade treats sometimes, and I'm always extra friendly and approbative with them. Some of them have their days regardless, and I put up with them. Right after I first started working in that specific clinic, unfortunately, one nurse in particular, let's call her Betrayal, had decided that I was on her blacklist. Betrayal hates doing work. She's like a kid playing Xbox when their parent asks them for help with groceries. She'll moan and groan, and if she helps at all, it's with angsty indignation. I needed a series of blood tubes drawn in clinic for a patient one morning, instead of down in phlebotomy, protocol rules. More complicated and stupid than it's worth getting into here. And Betrayal was the only nurse available. She was extremely put off at my asking her to draw this protocol kit, despite my giving advance notice to clinic that this needed to be done. She clearly did not want to leave her computer, which was not open to anything work-related, but she begrudgingly went and drew the tubes. She was unnecessarily profusely thanked by me, just for doing her damn job. I came back down later to get a prescription signed for another patient, and a different nurse asked me what I'd done to upset Betrayal because she'd apparently been going off about me to anyone who would listen. I explained what had happened. The other nurse informed me that Betrayal was pissed at me, and also felt my outfit, a white medical coat, a modest blouse, work pants, and high-heel boots, was too provocative. What? I just decided to let it go and try to avoid Betrayal as much as possible. This did not work. I kept running into situations where the other nurses were busy seeing patients. I was forced to walk back into the nurse triage room, which is off limits to patients, and ask Betrayal to draw 2 more of these blood kits in the next month. She was never happy to see me, and she was always wasting time on her work computer when I entered the room. Maybe 2 or 3 days after that last kit draw, my supervisor called me in her office to discuss my presentation. She very nicely, and with pity in her voice, told me she'd received a report about my dress habits in patient-facing spaces. She said she personally hadn't noticed anything, but was obligated to discuss this with me anyhow. I assured her I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought about confronting Betrayal, but decided not to because, yap knows, loose cannon and whatnot. After a brief reminder of the dress code, I figured that at least it was over. It was not over. 2 weeks later, and I hadn't even asked anyone to draw any kits in the interim, a formal report was filed against me for my conduct in clinic. This went to the hospital, and then my supervisor who, even after reading the report, seemed totally clueless about what it could mean. I explained what had been happening with Betrayal. But then my supervisor told me a second person had reported this as well, on the same day as who was obviously Betrayal. This time, it was a patient. The patient had reported that I was dressing improperly for a patient-facing environment. Whoa! I asserted that I wasn't, but I was nonetheless put on probation, which meant that my supervisor, against her will, now had to come with me when I saw patients in clinic for the foreseeable future, and a nurse manager would have to accompany both of us when she was free since I was dressing provocatively in patient-facing spaces, and that was her domain. But as you can likely guess from her browsing habits, Betrayal was not the sort of person who needed more supervisors in her area. Cue malicious compliance. Fine, you want to punish me and force me to work in the eyesight of the supervisors? All right, let's get some supervisors down here as quickly as possible. My next in-clinic patient came in 2 days, and it was one of those stupid timed in-clinic protocol kit visits, which meant I was forced to ask one of the nurses to draw the patient's blood. I informed my supervisor, and we set off down for clinic. The nurse manager was in that day, so she accompanied the 2 of us. We all went back into the triage room so that I could ask for help with the blood draw. Betrayal and one other nurse were there. What we saw upon entering was the other nurse entering vital signs for a patient into our health database, and Betrayal, sitting at her desk with an online clothing retailer open on one monitor and Facebook on the other. I asked for Mitchell's help drawing the kit, and she sighed heavily and spun around to see two higher-ups looking on with disdain at her work computer. In embarrassment, she swiveled back and closed those two tabs, which revealed, you can't make this stuff up, a website for marital aids that had been open in another tab, about which Betrayal had clearly forgotten until now. I just smiled and handed her the bag like nothing had happened. In the hall, my supervisor and the nurse manager were talking about Mitchell's display just now. Apparently, she had previously been warned about goofing off at work. The nurse manager told the supervisor that she was going to check all of Mitchell's work computer activity, which I actually didn't know any supervisor could readily access. What followed was so incredibly beautiful that I hope it made the ending of this long, long post worth waiting for. According to the nurse, who'd initially asked me what I had done to upset Betrayal, her activity was searched. She was revealed to have been spending hours upon hours every day browsing the web, shopping, and using social media. Since she had been previously warned about this behavior, she was given a formal write-up. But this was just the beginning. The day after the three of us went down to clinic, my supervisor called me in her office again. She told me that Betrayal had fabricated the patient complaint about me and posted it from her work computer. How did they learn this? Oh, that'd be because she saved a draft of the message that reported me to the hospital, and she'd accessed the patient complaint comment webpage the same day. My supervisor sincerely apologized for the hassle and told me I was no longer on probation. As for Betrayal, apparently fearing the worst, she put her 2 weeks' notice in the same day after getting wind that she was in some far more serious trouble. For reasons I will never understand as long as I live, the hospital chose to let her quit after 2 weeks instead of firing her on the spot. Maybe they knew what a nightmare she was and were comfortable letting her quit on her own accord. It's not as though she was due to glean any glowing references from this experience. Maybe they just wanted some extra work. Our clinic was very short-staffed for nurses at the time. In any case, they chose not to fire her and let her quit on her own. On Mitchell's last day, I ventured down to the triage room to retrieve some outside records from their printer. When I entered, Betrayal was alone and browsing Glassdoor. I unbuttoned my white coat and told her, "Hey, good luck with your next job. I hope the employees are less provocative." She slowly spun around with a scowl on her face. Then I lifted my dress up to my neck, flashed her bare tits, and walked out. And I never saw Betrayal again. TL. DR setup. I run drug trials at a research hospital. A clinic nurse decided she hated me because I made her do her job and, she claimed, dressed provocatively. She made a formal report against me, and then a patient one surfaced. I was put on probation and made to see all patients with supervisors. TL. DR resolution. Malicious compliance. I brought supervisors down as quickly as possible. Said supervisors found out the nurse had been spending many hours a day on non-work-related websites, and the patient report against me turned out to have been fabricated by the same nurse. She quit in disgrace, and on her last day, I gave her a nice parting gift. The malicious compliance was flawless. By forcing supervisors into the clinic, OP exposed Betrayal's laziness, dishonesty, and inappropriate behavior. The poetic justice of her downfall made the outcome even more satisfying. Story from Hippo_Singularity. There's a reason they have those limits in place, Chad. The big industrial and infrastructure jobs are always an exercise in logistics at a concrete plant. It takes about 40,000 pounds of concrete to fill a standard 10 cubic yard, about 2,020 gallons, drum. All that material has to be brought in by semi. To ship 100 yards, 10 mixes, it is going to take about 3 trucks of rock, 4 of sand, and 1 powder train. A single job can easily be over 1,000 yards. The biggest I have personally seen was over 5,000, and as much of a nightmare as it sounds. So this night, we are running about 2,000 yards on 2 boom pumps. The loads are basically going out back to back as fast as Bob, the plant manager, can load them. I am not in my truck. I am down in the yard directing traffic. The anthropomorphic personification of Putt's law, commonly known as Chad, had decided that this job is too big to let Bob handle things. Bob has only been with the company for 20 years. He is concerned that the drivers will get confused driving the 100 metres across the yard, so I am out there making sure the material trucks go to the material lane, a large grate in the ground where they can dump rock and sand down onto a conveyor belt. The powder trains go to the powder lane on the opposite side of the plant, where the hoses to pump the cement are, and the mixer drivers go to one of the batch lanes directly under the big, whom ping batch plant that they work at every day. Things are fine for the first few hundred yards, but Bob is spending powder faster than the powder trains can unload it. Eventually, the silos run dry, and things slow down to match the unloading rate. This upsets Chad. There are trucks stacked up at the job site, but they are starting to dwindle, while the line of empty trucks at the plant starts to extend out into the street. There is risk of a gap in service. Then we get a reprieve. One of the pumps breaks down, and the rate of work on the job site is cut in half. Bob can slow down enough that the powder trains refill the silos. We even get a couple stacked up and waiting to unload. When we get the word that the second pump is back in action, Bob goes over to the powder lane to tell the drivers that they can start unloading like normal as soon as he finishes loading the next truck. It is at this point that Chad oozes his way over, with all the charm and benign purpose of Sarah Lewis's cesspit. He doesn't want to risk a service gap. He wants the powder trains to start unloading faster, fast enough to match what Bob is sending out. The powder train drivers say they are already unloading as fast as they can. Chad doesn't believe this. He knows the transfer system operates on variable pressure, and the drivers do not operate at the compressor's limit. Cement powder is very fine, and it carries on the air very easily. When delivering cement, air is blasted into the trailer, creating a thick, misanthropic cloud of lung damage and chemical burns. Fortunately, this cloud is trapped inside the trailer, and the only escape is through a hose and up into the silo. The pumping speed by is dependent on the pressure inside the trailer, so what Chad wants them to do is up the pressure to the point where they are putting in powder at the same speed Bob is pulling it out. The drivers refuse to do it. Company policy limits the maximum pressure they can run at. Chad doesn't care. Those limits are there to keep the silo from getting overfilled. With Bob pulling out powder as fast as he is, there should be enough time to shut down if the inventory alarm goes off. The drivers still refuse. Then Chad threatens to fire them for delaying such an important job. Bob and the drivers look at each other, and then Bob unlocks the adjacent storeroom and walks away, while the drivers crank up the pressure. When he gets back to the office, Bob tosses me his keys and asks me to move his car over next to mine. Bob normally parks right next to the office, on what is usually the leeward side of the building. I normally park on the east end of the yard. I like it better than the street, but it means my car catches a lot of dust off the plant. So I move Bob's car and start walking back. By this time, Chad has moved up onto the catwalk above the loading lanes, where he can gaze over his efficient little kingdom like Yertle the turtle. Then one of the bag houses burps. If you look at that picture of the powder silos, you might notice what look like miniature silos on top of them. Those are the bag houses. Inside each of them are several dozen felt bags, like 4-foot-long windsocks with one end sewn shut. That end is hung from the roof, while the open end is clamped to holes in the floor, the roof of the main silo. As the air and cement powder is blasted into the silo, those bags act as filters, allowing the air to escape while keeping the cement inside. As best as we can figure, what happened was that the air was being blown in at a high enough pressure that it was packing those bags full of powder and restricting the airflow out. There was no alarm because the powder level was still below the sensor, but the pressure was building up inside. When the pressure finally grew too great, it tore 3 bags, blew open the baghouse door, ripping the lock off in the process, and spewed a mushroom cloud of powder into the air. I am about halfway back across the yard when I see the powder drivers slap their dump valves and dive into the storeroom. A couple seconds later, somebody turns off the moon. A couple seconds after that, the penny drops, and I race for the office at a dead sprint. Chad is still up on the catwalk. Chad does not realize what has just happened. Thanks to the massive halogen lamps mounted all over the plant, he does not notice lack of moonlight. He has no clue that directly above him, one of the baghouses is vomiting out darkness like an angry bilious volcano god. All Chad can see is me running into the office and pulling the doorstop, and the drivers all across the yard in front of him frantically rolling up their windows. And then it hit him. Our plant is on the west side of the yard. This is pretty normal in Southern California because the prevailing winds blow in off the ocean. That means that any dust or powder that escapes the plant blows across our yard and has a chance to settle there before crossing into the neighbouring properties. For similar reasons, the baghouse doors open towards the yard. In addition, that means Chad is standing on the east catwalk so he can look across the bulk of the yard. Finally, that means that when falling powder was caught by the Santa Ana winds that had been blowing on and off all night, it got pushed straight back into Chad's face. The stuff came boiling down across the catwalk, hit the ground, and flooded out both sides of the loading lane. It was the kind of thing you expect to see Dwayne Johnson running away from, a semi-dysfunctional sibling unit in tow, about to learn a valuable lesson about life, love, and/or family, while O Fortuna blares over the house speakers. The mess it made was glorious, especially in the break room, which had an open door facing the loading lane. The people inside were pissed. Things could have been much worse. Fortunately, since the powder drivers were expecting it, usually the immediate response to a baghouse failure is for the driver to stand there dumbfounded for a couple seconds and then shut everything down. These guys killed the system in both silos immediately. Still, there was a lot of pressure in the silo, and it doesn't take a lot of powder to make a huge cloud. We also had to run for the rest of the night with the torn bags. I did rebolt the door closed. After the shift ended, I took a little drive downwind of the plant. There was cement powder in parking lots a half-mile away. Now, in normal circumstances, a blown baghouse is going to cause an investigation, and someone is probably going to be suspended or fired. These were not normal circumstances. AQMD got wind of what happened. The air quality management districts are the boogeyman of the construction industry. If you've ever driven past a construction site, you have probably seen the big signs that say, if you see dust coming from this project, call, and several phone numbers. One of those numbers is always for AQMD, usually the last one because the contractor is hoping for a chance to fix things before AQMD shows up. Just arriving on site is enough to completely shut down operations, while a bunch of 300-pound truckers and construction workers peer fearfully through the blinds at a little white pickup and its 110-pound occupant. The reason for this bowel-voiding fear is that AQMD can levy absolutely stupid high fines. In California, the cap is $1 million per day per violation, though you would basically have to be a Captain Planet villain to actually get a fine that high. Now, AQMD can't prove it was us. Technically, another plant could have blown a baghouse during an overnight delivery, but we were the only plant running a large night job in the area. They know it's us, and that is putting us under greater scrutiny. Corporate doesn't particularly like that, so the investigation gets kicked up a notch. Blame is immediately leveled at the driver whose silo blew. Between him, the other driver, and Bob, however, it soon becomes apparent that he had been forced to violate policy by Chad. More than that, Chad was in charge of the ready mix division, but the powder drivers fell under the authority of the materials division. He had been threatening an employee he had no authority over. Technically, the materials division is a separate company from ready mix. Corporate wasn't about to just fire one of their highest-ranking executives, since that would look bad. Instead, Chad was promoted and given a larger office with a spectacular view of the San Bernardino Mountains. In addition to his duties with the ready mix division, Chad was put in charge of the construction of new facilities. Of course, at that time, the only facility under construction was the new quarry. Unfortunately, The quarry was nowhere near the corporate office or Chad's house, so his desk was relocated on site. There wasn't anything permanent up at the quarry yet, so Chad's new office was converted from a steel container. It had a corrugated metal awning to keep direct sunlight off the roof, a couple windows cut in the sides, spray-on insulation all over the inside, and a wall-mounted AC unit. It also had a portable toilet planted next to it because there was no plumbing or on-site water yet. It did, as stated, have an absolutely spectacular view of the mountains, though that would probably have been more enjoyable without all the noise and dust from the construction. To his credit, he lasted 3 whole weeks before deciding it was time to retire. TLDR. An upper manager threatened the job of 2 drivers unless they violated safety limits on their equipment. It ended up causing a minor disaster from which almost everyone but said manager found shelter. He was transferred to a site with minimal facilities in the middle of nowhere and quit shortly thereafter. Won't get me a much-needed PC upgrade to properly do my job? Okay, I'll make you watch me work. This was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. Chad's arrogance led to his own downfall. He got buried in the cloud of cement and was finally demoted to a minor position. This is why, it is said, arrogance finally leads to downfall. And the same happened with Chad. Story from Timo, thy 53. My first boss, and how he got the whole team every certification available. When I turned 14 years old, I got my first summer job and had one of the best bosses I'd ever had. I recently found out that unfortunately, my mentor and someone I would consider a friend, John, passed away. Although it's been well over 20 years, I still use the lessons learned and the work ethic he passed on to me. Although at times he could be hard, he was more than fair and always did the right thing for those that worked for him. This is the story of John versus the new president. Before I get into the story, I need to give some background and context on John. John was the textbook all-American boy. John had attended a prestigious boarding school somewhere in New England and eventually attended Yale back in the late 1950s and 60s and was not only a scholar but a 3-sport athlete. He played football, he boxed, and was a captain on the track and field team. Fast forward to when this story takes place, and John was still in phenomenal shape for a late 60s, early 70s man. John opted to move out to the country, start a family to follow his passion, which was teaching at the local high school and coaching high scholars in various sports. Obviously, he was the high school football coach, taught track and field. He was an outstanding shot-put athlete and could run the mile and many other long distances. As a teacher, he had the summers off and became a lifeguard at the local town beach, eventually becoming the captain of the lifeguards. Over time, he developed standards for the town, county, state lifeguards to pass. He really transformed what was a ragtag style of lifeguards into a fully fledged official lifeguard corps, training academy, and set the standards for what is still used today. John was eventually hired to run the lifeguards and manage an entire private beach club instead of working for the town beach. One of the biggest challenges of this, since it was a private beach club, John now reported into a president of the beach club who oversaw how things were run. I started working for John as a helper on the beach and then eventually a lifeguard, and for the first couple of summers things was great. The president of the beach club took pride in having the best staff and making sure that lifeguards were well paid, and to his credit, safety was the utmost priority. This private beach club certainly catered to the more wealthy clientele who wanted a nicer club instead of going to the public beach. Some of the advantages were the amenities, which were lockers, cabanas, private parking, a very nice restaurant that served great food and drinks. This was one of the few beach clubs that also had the ability to serve alcoholic beverages. One of the good things John had instituted was that any returning member of the staff from the previous summers automatically got a raise. This ensured that staff returned the next summer, avoiding a lot of retraining and, as you can imagine, growing pains with a new staff. What was even better was that if you returned multiple summers, you still got an additional raise. Most summers, this was $1 or $2. As an example, I started at $7.25 at 14 years old. This was back in the late 90s. And by the time I was in college, I was making almost $15 an hour. Typically, the president of the club serves a term, which is a few years, and when his term was up, a new president was ushered in. Upon taking office, the new president loudly proclaimed that he wanted to ensure that the club had fiscal responsibility, and he would be personally going over the books with a fine-tooth comb. His first order of business was to cut everyone's pay all the way back to minimum wage and fire most of the lifeguards. Now, as noted above, the staff was there for a long time, knowing most of the members and how to run the place. Prior to the start of the summer, upon learning that their hourly wage would be cut, most of the senior staff immediately left and were quickly hired elsewhere. The lifeguards were spared at the appeal of John to ensure safety. Although some senior guards left for other beaches and pools, John was able to convince the lifeguards as he would take care of things. On to the MC, while John agreed to have the staff take the pay cut, he convinced the new president that any lifeguards with additional certifications would get $2 an hour on top of the base minimum wage. The new president obviously didn't consider that any of these lifeguards would put in the effort or if it was feasible to get any certifications in time for the summer season, and he agreed to the plan. As you can imagine, John basically established the process and curriculum for becoming a lifeguard and personally trained and hired most, if not all, the trainers in the town and county. John was also a volunteer fireman and knew all the EMS personnel, and not surprisingly, had either taught them in school or hired them as lifeguards in their past lives. John quickly called in favours from every trainer and certifier across the county, who were more than happy to repay all the favours John had done for them in the past. Most waived the training fees and expedited the training sessions for the lifeguards, and they wanted to promote safety for the community. Prior to the start of the Memorial Day weekend, and what is effectively the unofficial start of summer, all of us lifeguards and new staff become certified in pretty much every single possible certification that existed at the time. I mean, I'm talking crazy complete overkill and unnecessary certifications for a regular lifeguard. We got trained as either EMS and EMTs, although lifeguards had to be certified in CPR. We retrained and got our CPR certifications again, life-saving ocean and pool rescue techniques, certified swimming instructor, certified food inspector, the club had a kitchen, certified county pool operator license, certified sanitary inspector, cleaning the bathrooms. We even had one guy who wanted to learn how to scuba. The county's firefighters had a water rescue team who coincidentally were certified scuba instructors. Most of us guards become certified divers, open water divers, deep water rescue divers, the whole works. I could go on and on about all the certifications we got. The lifeguards not only went back to their original wage, but in most cases went well above what their previous wages were. At 18 years old and back in the 90s, I personally went from making $15 an hour to $27 an hour, all due to the certifications and trainings. It took a month or so for the fallout to happen. While the new president tried to renege on the deal, John was smart enough to have a formal arrangement in place, and there was nothing the new president could do besides bitch about it. He winded up resigning his position to spend more time with his family at the beach. We rarely saw him around that summer, and I think he eventually stopped coming altogether, opting to join another club. John made nice with the new president and explained his philosophy on training and keeping staff. The new president agreed, and some of the senior staff winded up coming back with the promise of their original wage. A few weeks ago, I heard from friends and former colleagues that just at the start of the summer season, John passed away in sleep of natural causes at the ripe age of 91. He was still working, although not as much in the past. It was more of a I want to keep busy type of thing than a need to work. Every morning he would take out the lifeguard's rowboat and get some exercise in. After all, he was a certified rowing instructor. R.I.P. John, you were the best. The malicious compliance was brilliant. John used the president's short-sightedness against him, ensuring lifeguards earned more instead of less. His deep connections and expertise turned a bad policy into a huge win, forcing the president out.